Hello everyone, and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classic series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and we are continuing our look at the games of the great Swedish player Gideon Stahlberg. But we're not only looking at wins, and this is a rather surprising but very interesting loss against the Swiss player Henri Grob in Ostend in 1936. Of course, Grob, very well known for the experiments he did a little bit later in his life, I think, with the amazing 1G4. But he was also just a very good player in his own right, who could also play sensible openings as well. And this is a very interesting game in the Queen's Gambit declined. So let's have a little look at how it went. So we've got d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, d5, knight f3, knight bd7. Pretty common move order around that time. Bishop g5, bishop e7, e3, castles, rook c1 and c6. And this is the real orthodox Queen's Gambit declined. Played very much in the 1930s. Lots of games between Alekhine and Capablanca in this. Very, very solid. Stahlberg played it many, many times as well, with both colours in actual fact. So here Stahlberg follows the main line, bishop d3, d takes c4, bishop takes c4 and knight d5. And Black's idea in the Queen's Gambit declined is basically to swap off two pairs of minor pieces, a knight and the dark squared bishops. Once Black does that, then the slight disadvantage in space that Black has doesn't really matter because you've got such few pieces left in your position. Now lots of different ideas. Bishop takes e7, queen takes e7. Alekhine pioneered the use of knight e4. It's not that spectacular, but it did get him a fantastic win against Lasker in 1934. But Stahlberg played the main line, which was castles. And now knight takes c3, rook takes c3 and e5. And, well, this position occurred many times with both colours in the games of the Swedish players, the strong Swedish players of that time, the three Musketeers they called them, Stahlberg, Stoltz and Lundin. Stoltz played queen c2 mainly, also played d takes c5, which is the really old move a number of times. Lundin played this mainly with Black, and Stahlberg has 13 white games and 11 Black games in the database only, so he must have played even more than that. He played everything in this position: bishop b3, d takes c5, queen c2, and also queen b1 against Gligorich, I think, twice even. Bishop b3 is the engine's favourite, and yeah, Stahlberg plays it in this game against Grob. Yeah, I mean, what is White's idea here, really? Well, yeah, I mean, you're trying to sort of, you know, anticipate what Black is going to do and try and get your pieces ready for all the different pawn structures. The key thing is that Black will have to release the central tension because, well, this knight is protecting the pawn on e5. So if Black wants to complete development, going to have to move the knight on d7, which means doing something with this pawn on e5. And you can either take on d4 or you can play e5 to e4. Now, intuitively, I would always think that you should take on d4 because playing e4, it reminds me very much of a game that went very wrong when I was a second to Joël Luthier against Yasser Seirawan. I can't remember which tournament it was. It was sometime in 1995, and I think it was in Amsterdam as well. But yeah, the point is after e4, you know, you're sort of doing something like a kingside attack, right? I mean, you're getting rid of this knight on f3 and you'd love to start attacking, only you don't have a dark squared bishop. So your chances of really having a strong attack are not that great. And, well, I mean, then you've just got lots of weak dark squares around your centre. You know, to me, this does not feel very good at all. But it's what Grob plays. And actually, the engines, yeah, are completely happy with it as well. So, yeah, you know, what do I know? What have the engines played in this position? Well, a5 was a move that both Stockfish and Torch liked very much. Very little played in actual fact. e4 played by Grob, of course, and e takes d4 is also a very common move. After e takes d4, e takes d4 is normal, and the idea is that we're going to get a tempo on the queen and be able to bring the rook into play, maybe get the knight into e5 when this knight moves. It looks very, very dangerous, and indeed, you know, a number of games were actually won in double quick time like this. There's a great little game, Stahlberg against Verendel, which is well worth showing you. Let me just get this one here in my vision. Where is it? Stahlberg against Menchik. Let's have a look. Where was it? Where was it? Where was it? It was... that's right. It was in here. So I'm looking at completely the wrong thing in actual fact. So it wasn't after bishop b3. It was in fact after the move queen c2. So queen c2 here. E takes d4, e takes d4, knight f6, rook e1, queen d6, and now knight g5. And you can see that white's teeing up on pretty much everything. This rook can come over to here, for example. And, well, there is a defense here, but Verendel fell into something that was to become a very typical trap. Played the move queen f4, and then got hit with knight f7, rook f3. Queen goes back to c7, and then rook f e3. So we're threatening rook e8 check, which is going to be mate because the rook is pinned there. We're also threatening rook e7 because of the pin on the rook on f7. And, well, after king f8 from Verendel, she was hit. You might want to pause the video, see whether you can spot it. She was hit by the glorious queen takes h7. That's why I wanted to show this to you. Forgive the rather slowness there, with the idea of knight h7, rook e8, checkmate. So queen h7, a few more moves, and then Stahlberg won the game. So that was Stahlberg against Verendel in 1938. So lots of lots of tricks there. But yeah, after bishop b3, I mean, e takes d4. It is possible to defend better than that. But Grob played e4, which is not too bad. Knight d2, and then pretty aggressive move there. King h8 played by Grob. So what he's looking for actually is to play the pawn to f5. Yeah, I mean the engine's generally playing the move knight f6 in these positions, and actually playing g6, bishop f5, h5, playing like that, just keeping it really solid. And yeah, white's a little bit better, but yeah, it doesn't really seem to be that serious at all. But king h8, very aggressive from Grob, and after queen to c2, played the move f5. Now, in principle, I mean, that's a decent idea. You know, you protect your advanced central pawn with a pawn, and that just is going to free your pieces, basically. You won't need to have a knight or a bishop defending the pawn. They're free to do anything. On the other hand, you know, the bishop on c8 is restricted by the pawn on f5, so it's not like you've got a great deal to do with that piece. Yeah, I mean, the engine's... now, yeah, what Stahlberg went for, he went for the move f3, which... human player, you know, looks very, very logical. What the engines actually were looking at were playing moves like a4 in actual fact, you know, in order to try and go a5 and even a6 to weaken the queen side, which I thought was quite interesting. But yeah, Stahlberg played f3, and that's really the natural human move. And now Grob did something really, really very cunning in actual fact. Certainly not the best move by any means, but very, very clever. The engineers want just e takes f3, rook takes, and knight f6 here. With, yeah, you know, just a pretty decent position. If you go e4, then the engineers even want this clever move, queen d8, hitting d4, which is a little bit awkward for white. A bit hard to defend this in some sort of elegant way. Yeah, I mean, that would have been completely reasonable, but Grob played knight f6, and I guess that he was sort of thinking of the trap that occurred in the game. So Stahlberg took on e4, f takes e4, and now he played a very natural idea. I mean, black pieces are not that well developed. I mean, you know, you've got this rook on f8. You've got the rook on a8 and bishop on c8 that haven't moved. And, well, if you just look for a little while, you're going to think that white's got an excellent tactic here, which is knight takes c4. Because if you go knight takes c4, I'm just going to take, and queen takes c4, and pick up a pawn. Easy. What could be wrong with that? Well, that's what Stahlberg thought, and he played knight takes c4. And then he got hit by Grob's fantastic idea, which is to play bishop f5. So there's a pin on the knight on e4. But I can go rook takes f5. The bishop's just unprised, right? Well, now we play the move knight takes e4. And the queen's no longer protecting the rook on f5 because that communication has been cut. And we're also attacking the knight on c3 here. The rook on c3 here, rather. And that rook does not have any fantastic places to go to. And it turns out that this is actually really embarrassing for white. Rook takes f8 is natural. Rook takes f8 and then rook d3, for example. But then black plays the move queen g5. And actually there's no good defense to rook f2, which is going to force the win of white's queen. There's another possibility here. You could go d5 here, for example, in this position. And then the engine is even pointing out this idea, knight f2, which is very, very similar, of course. The idea being that if you play something like rook c3, I can go knight h3 check, and then rook f1 checkmate. It is simply amazing, but it just looks that after this move bishop f5, white is completely lost. And the really ironic thing about it is that if white had played the move rook c5, white would be winning. Because you're stopping this move bishop f5 and you're just threatening rook e5, after which you really will win that pawn on e4. So it's incredible in actual fact. I mean, it's just one big trap, basically, knight e4, bishop f5, but such a powerful trap that white just seems to be losing as soon as it happens. So, I mean, Stahlberg thought for a long time here and then played the move rook e5, which looks natural. I mean, you could even have seen bishop f5 and thought, okay, rook e5, just picking up the knight. Unfortunately, the move, well, there's a couple of moves. Grob played queen f6, queen h4 is also good. But this queen f6 is very, very strong. I mean, we're threatening queen f1 checkmate, and we're still threatening knight takes c3 here. Amazing stuff. So h3 was played by Stahlberg. Knight takes c3, b takes c3, black's the exchange up for a pawn, and now the move rook e8. And basically there's not much that white can do. White has to exchange off the rooks, because otherwise the pawn on e3 will hang if you move the rook away. So it's, you know, it's sort of all-round disaster here, basically. After rook e8, Grob threw in queen f1 check, why not, and rook e8. And now queen d2. So, I mean, this position is pretty winning for black, you've got to say. Question is, how do you want to finish it off? The engines suggest something very interesting, which is queen f6. The idea being that, you know, after some move like queen d3, you're coming over with queen h6. Actually, it turns out that it's pretty much impossible for white to defend this e-pawn. Because if you do something like e4, I've just got queen f4 check takes e4. So it actually looks like queen f6 was just winning the e3 pawn by force. Incredible in actual fact. Grob played also a very aggressive move. He played the move rook f8, and he's looking for rook f2. Stahlberg found nothing better than e4. The idea being that if rook f2, we go queen to g5. Haha, defending g2. Now, I mean, the engines just think that queen f4 check now would just simply be winning e5, g6, or g5, and then we just bring the king in to stop the pawns, and then this rook will eventually start getting busy on the pawns. That would be a very simple and technical way to do it. I mean, Grob just kept on going. He was a pretty aggressive player, Grob. So he played h6, which is a very sneaky move. It seems to be giving the king some space. Actually, it's threatening rook f2 now because there's no more queen g5. I thought that was really, really very sneaky there. But Stahlberg continued. He played the move king g3, stopping rook f2 and also stopping queen f4. So yeah, not bad. g5 was played by Grob, setting up the threat of queen f4 check again. Stahlberg played bishop e6, looking to play bishop f5. And now, of course, queen f4 check would have been the most sensible. Again, e5, king g7, you've got your king into play. And, you know, again, you're just going to bring your king round here and then start hitting the queenside pawns with your rook again. I mean, it's completely winning. But Grob was looking to finish things in beauty. So he played the move rook f4. And, I mean, basically, he's looking to do something like queen g1 and then deliver mate with h5 to h4. It's a very nice idea, got to say. So Stahlberg played the move queen e3 and h5 followed. So, well, there's no threat yet. So d5 was played by Stahlberg. Quite sensible. The queen's sort of getting some escape squares. There's a check coming in, and you've also got the chance of going, you know, d6 to d7. Why not? Best chance for counterplay there. Black's got to be a little bit careful here. King h7 was played by Grob here. The engines prefer c takes d5 the most, but king h7 is sort of okay. Bishop f5 check played, and this was actually where Stahlberg missed his chance, because there is actually one very cunning move here. You might want to stop the video and just have a little think about it, because yeah, it's quite unusual in actual fact, and very easy to miss. I mean, what the engines want is to play the move king h2. And the idea of that is that, well, the king's no longer in danger. I mean, you played king g3 to stop the queen coming to f4. Now you move it back. And why is this decent for white? Well, it's because you've managed to get some counterplay with d6 to d7. Now, I thought that this should surely just be winning for black. But actually, the engines are saying that here and here is actually possible. King g7. King g3, rook d2, e5. Rook d3 check, king f2, rook takes c3, bishop d7. And you're just going to go e6 to e7. So basically, black's going to take the pawn and just keep on checking. I mean, if black could get the rook to the e file and combine with a king, you might be able to give your rook up for these two pawns and then have lots of passed pawns against white. But basically, white's just going to stay on the e-file, stop you getting back to the e-file, and the e-pawn's going to queen. So, I mean, I think something like e6, check, king f3, check, king f2 would be pretty much what you'd expect to happen here. So, yeah, it's amazing, actually. I mean, Grob sort of trying to mate in beauty, actually just ended up almost messing it up completely there. But Stahlberg was in time trouble. He played the move bishop f5 check, king g8. Now if you go bishop e6 check, we go king g7, takes rook f6, and we sort of hang together. As soon as the rook moves away, we're threatening queen f4 check with mate, which just gives that extra tempo. That's why it's so important to have that. The other point is, for example, if you went queen takes a7, I'd do the same. Rook takes f5 with the idea of e takes f5, queen f4 checkmate. You know, that's why this is a little bit of a difficult position. But Stahlberg played d takes c6. And then a lovely move here from Grob. He played the move queen h1. And here Stahlberg resigned here because, yeah, I mean, you're just actually going to play h4 checkmate. And there's pretty much nothing that white can do about it. If queen takes f4, I just take the queen, of course. That's pretty much the only way that I can stop mate. Bishop e6. I can sort of play somewhere like king h7, bishop f5, and king h6, and then the checks are gone. So that was a pretty fascinating game in actual fact. It all turned on one amazing trap, actually. Yeah? So Basically, I mean, this idea of Grob's to allow knight takes e4, in principle, it wasn't great. A strong move like rook c5, and black is completely finished. But knight e4, and then this amazing trap bishop f5, and all of a sudden Stahlberg was just completely lost. That must have come as an absolutely massive shock. But, you know, you often see this in these classic games that somehow, you know, there are always amazing chances here. You know, it's with Grob just avoiding, you know, the obvious exchange of queens, you know, the easy technical win, and playing for mate. Suddenly there were chances, and I mean, already here actually it's, you know, it's feeling a little bit tricky. But yeah, this is quite an amazing little resource. Just king h2, making the king safe again, and then yeah, I mean, there's no real way for black to keep things safe, especially since after queen f2, you know, white's even happy to exchange off the queens there. Of course, you know, this moves like d7 are getting to be quite a serious threat at some stage, because if rook d2, we can just block the d file with bishop d5. So incredible game there, and a bit of a shock loss for Stahlberg, who was in principle, you know, he was kind of one of the super grandmasters, and Grob was just a normal master, but still a great win for the Swiss player there. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that. Plenty more to come, wins and losses of Stahlberg against all sorts of players. So do stay tuned for more great games, and thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you at the next videos. Thanks for watching.